Hello there, and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. Today, we're going to talk about two legislative victories that have taken place in Idaho that you should know about. You don't have to pop a champagne cork if you don't want to, but these are two victories that help make government more accountable, and they're also things that may fly under some people's radar unless you really pay close attention to the legislative process. I've got details coming up.
All reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy.
Once again, welcome to Nowhere to Hide. It's a pleasure to get to sit down twice a week and go over some of the important things taking place in the Idaho legislature. And of course, the legislative session is soon to wrap up, but there are a couple of things that need to be celebrated as victories. And the Idaho Freedom Foundation, I think, is justified in calling this one out and setting up some fireworks. The governor signed two IFF recommended bills. They're massive game changers for the state of Idaho. So let's talk a little bit about each one of them. The first one is House Bill 90. Governor signed this into law. This one stops backroom deals between the state and the federal government in order to grow welfare programs. And a special thank you to Senator Brian Lenny for carrying this one through. Now, let's get a little bit of history as to why this bill was needed in the first place. And this is something you can check out for yourself by going to the Idaho Freedom Foundation website, idahofreedom.org. Just check out the analysis of the 2025 bills, and you can see this for yourself. Nicholas Kleinworth was the one who wrote up this analysis. He says, though this legislation doesn't directly impact state or local spending or revenues, it's worth noting that it could have a positive impact on spending through changing the behavior of Idaho's agencies. So this is important, even if it's not strictly dollars and cents, the way that they go about spending their money needed to be addressed. As an example, the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare announced a $16 million shortfall in the Idaho Child Care program this summer. Now, that was partially due to the agency raising reimbursement rates and reducing co-payments in the system. And the agency circumvented legislative accountability by making those changes through what's called a state plan amendment, or SPA, which is a direct agreement with the department and the federal government. Closing that sub-regulatory loophole created by SPAs could reduce costs by requiring legislative oversight of any expansion of public assistance programs. Those savings are more likely under this arrangement, he points out. They're not guaranteed. But again, we're looking at the foundational way that these agencies spend money. House Bill 90 requires any expansion of benefits or eligibility in public assistance program be made in statute. Neither of these kinds of changes can be made in rule, state plan amendment, agency guidance, or other documents. Now, generally, documentation like guidance or state plans and others are more obscured from the public and legislators than things that are actually in statute or rule. Idaho statute and administrative rules are more easily accessible once they have the force of law, and any changes to their provisions are conducted in public. So this is about increasing transparency and accountability for Idaho's bureaucracy. Nicholas points out SPAs and guidance documents are tools that executive agencies routinely use to circumvent the statutory and rulemaking process as established in the Constitution of the state of Idaho. This was the case in the Idaho Child Care program, as mentioned earlier. Now, he cites Article 3 of the Idaho Constitution, Section 1, which grants the Senate and House of Representatives the power to legislate. Section 29 also provides the legislative branch with the power to review administrative rules. Now, though not explicitly in violation of the Idaho Constitution, expanding the scope of a program through sub-regulatory documentation instead of through the proper rulemaking or legislative process, it's a violation in spirit. So closing this sub-regulatory loophole forces executive branch agencies to move policy changes through the legislative branch. That upholds the spirit of the Idaho Constitution. It also means more transparent and accountable government to the citizens of Idaho. So there's the good news on the first bill. Let's take a look at the second one. This is House Bill 177, which declares gold and silver legal tender in the state of Idaho. And a thank you to Representative Steve Miller for carrying this bill. So maybe you don't use gold and silver in your day-to-day transactions, but when I guess the case needs to be made that gold and silver still have their place. After all, they are in the Constitution, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But the main thing we need to remember is when monies become corrupted, or when a money or a currency becomes corrupted, it allows for greater corruption in government. We are seeing this in great detail, sickening detail at the federal level. So let's break down House Bill 177 with gold and silver as legal tender. House Bill 177 upholds the spirit of Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution. This is where it allows states to make money, or rather to make gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. Now, scholars have debated the constitutionality of paper money for 150 years. Some argue the gold and silver clause requires states to reject the federal government's push toward unsound monetary policies like the fiat money that we use today. This would be consistent, actually, with the founders' vision, as James Madison stated in Federalist 44, quote, "The extension of the prohibition to bills of credit must give pleasure to every citizen, in proportion to his love of justice and his knowledge of the true springs of public prosperity. The loss which America has sustained since the peace from the pestilent efforts of paper money on the necessary confidence between man and man, on the necessary confidence in the public councils, on the industry and morals of the people, and on the character of Republican government, constitutes an enormous debt against the states chargeable with this unadvised measure, which must long remain unsatisfied." So paper money's convenient, digital money even more convenient, but real money, or at least real currency that represents something tangible, divisible, non-fungible, and that cannot be faked, that keeps spending honest. It keeps government honest. And this is one of the reasons why at the federal level we're seeing so much dishonesty as it pertains to money. Now, Nicholas Kleinworth says on another note, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution makes it clear that Congress, not the states, has the power to coin money and to regulate its value. And this provision makes it possible to conduct interstate transactions. So, though Idaho must recognize gold and silver as legal tender under this bill, the state can't mint an Idaho coin. House Bill 177 is careful to avoid this issue by merely recognizing in statute that gold and silver bullion and coin are legal tender, whether minted by the federal government or privately. So this legislation is consistent with and promotes current conservative constitutional scholarship. Now, he also points out that this legislation reduces barriers in the free market by allowing individuals and businesses to transact in a sound currency as an alternative to the dollar. Even though it's true that private parties could mutually consent to settle debts in gold and silver today, there are a lot of numerous requirements that make this impractical. This includes treating gold and silver as a commodity, which requires the buyer to also settle taxes applied to the gains from the sale. You know, you don't pay capital gains when you spend a $100 bill, but if you cash in gold, then you're expected to pay capital gains. Making physical gold and silver legal tender simplifies transactions in this sound currency, reducing barriers to those who wish to do business in this way. He goes on to say House Bill 177 includes language that protects businesses who choose not to settle debts with gold or silver. In fact, the bill states, no person or other entity may compel another person to or another entity to tender or accept gold or silver coin or specie unless agreed upon by the parties. Now, there's an exception for contracts that include such requirements. So though it doesn't reduce or eliminate intervention in the free market, it does maintain protection for businesses who choose not to exchange gold or silver currency in favor of other legal tender. And, this is one of the things that I hope to see, within my lifetime, and that is I would like to see people starting to do more transactions in gold and silver. And it's not that, we need to go back to the old days. We need to write everything on paper and not use computers. No, I'm just saying that we will know that people have a clear idea of what constitutes real money when we start to see gold and silver being used in day-to-day transactions. Right now, because of the banking system, especially because of the fiat money that is used by the fractional reserve banking system, it's a bit burdensome to use that. It's not to say you couldn't do it in private deals, but at most stores, if you pulled out a gold coin, they'd be looking at you like a brook trout, trying to figure out what to do with it. So it would be nice to see this open up the doors to businesses that say, yes, of course, we accept silver, we accept gold when it comes to how they do business. We're one step closer under this new law. So there you have it, 2 legislative victories that expand greater accountability and greater transparency for government, and also protect your freedom through sound money, without which corruption becomes the norm rather than the exception. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
All reporters are biased. The Idaho Press Club are biased. All media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
Indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money